I left behind everything I had in India, my home, my dignity, my health. I worked 19 hours a day in a city where nobody even knew my name, eating cold food inside a parked car, sleeping on a mattress on the floor, and sending every dollar I could back to the family I was doing all of this for. For 8 months, I kept telling myself it was worth it, until one phone call, from a woman I had never met in my life, destroyed everything I believed in. What she told me about my own son. Even today, I can't say it out loud without feeling something heavy in my chest. This is not a story about America. This is a story about what happens when the people you sacrifice everything for start seeing you as something that exists only to be used. I was their father, their husband, their provider. But at some point, without anyone ever saying it out loud, I had become something completely different. And the worst part? I almost never found out. It was early April, just before 5 o'clock, and I was standing outside a convenience store on Devon Avenue in Chicago, waiting for my shift manager to unlock the back door. The wind was coming off Lake Michigan like a punishment. It cut through my jacket, through my sweater, all the way down to something inside me that I didn't have a name for yet. I was 45 years old. My knees already ached by noon. And I had been in America for 7 months. 7 months? Back in Nagpur, 7 months felt like nothing. You blink and a season changes. But in Chicago, in that winter that wouldn't end, 7 months felt like I had been carrying a boulder up a hill that had no top. Let me go back to the beginning. Because the beginning matters. The beginning is where the lie starts. I was born the second son in a family that never had much but always had pride. My father worked at a textile mill outside Nagpur for 31 years. He wore the same 3 shirts on rotation. He never complained. He used to say, and I can hear his voice even now, even here, he used to say, "Rajan, a man who works hard will never go hungry." I believed him completely. I built my entire life on that one sentence. I worked in a small hardware supply business for 18 years. My wife Meena and I had 2 children. Our son Arjun, who was 22 when I left, and our daughter Priya, who was 19. We lived in a 2-bedroom flat in Dhurampeth. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. We ate together every night. Meena made dal that could make a man cry, it was so good. On Sundays, I watched cricket with Arjun and argued about everything and agreed about nothing. Those fights were the best conversations of my life. Then my brother-in-law Vikram came back from New Jersey. Vikram had been there for 4 years working in a hotel. He came back wearing a North Face jacket and new shoes and talking louder than I remembered. He sat at our dinner table and told stories the whole evening about the money, the freedom, the opportunity, the way a single dollar could become 5 if you were willing to work. He made America sound like a place where hard work had a direct relationship with reward. A clean equation. Put in effort, get out results. "Rajan Bhai," he said, leaning across the table and pointing at me, "a man like you, a man who knows how to work, you would not survive there. You would thrive." I told myself I wasn't interested. I told Meena the same thing that night. But the seed was planted. I don't know exactly when it took root. Maybe it was when our landlord raised the rent for the 3rd time in 2 years. Maybe it was when Arjun's job applications kept coming back rejected, and I watched my son, my smart, hard-working son, begin to shrink inside himself from the shame of it. Maybe it was when my business partner told me quietly that our supply contracts were being taken over by a larger company, and I understood then that everything I had built for 18 years was going to slowly disappear. Whatever it was, by December, I was looking at visa options. By February, I had a tourist visa. By March, I had a one-way ticket. I told myself it was temporary. 6 months, maybe a year. I would work, save, send money back, return. Simple. Clean. Like Vikram said. Meena didn't cry when I left. That should have told me something. She helped me pack my suitcase, made sure I had enough warm clothes, cooked me one last meal, aloo paratha with extra ghee, and stood at the door of the flat holding Priya's hand. Priya cried. Meena just looked at me with those steady dark eyes and said, "Be careful, Rajan. Not I'll miss you. Not to come back soon. Just be careful." I have thought about those 2 words 1,000 times since then. Chicago was nothing like what Vikram described. I arrived at O'Hare on a Tuesday afternoon in late October, and the cold hit me the moment the airport doors opened. Not the pleasant hill station cold of Mahabaleshwar, a gray, aggressive, personal cold, like the city itself was telling me I had made a mistake. Vikram's cousin, Suresh, had arranged a room for me in a shared apartment on North Clark Street. 3 men in a 2-bedroom. My bed was a mattress on the floor in the living room, separated from the kitchen by a curtain. The rent was $600 a month, which Suresh told me was a very good deal. I paid it without arguing because I didn't yet understand how to argue in this country. Within the first week, Suresh got me the job at the convenience store on Devon Avenue. It was called Quick Stop. The owner was a Gujarati man named Bhavesh, who spoke to me in a mix of Hindi and English that I mostly understood. The pay was $11 an hour, cash. No contract, no benefits, no record. Bhavesh was not cruel, but he was not kind either. He was efficient. He looked at me the way you look at a machine, useful until it breaks. My shift was 5 a.m. to 2 p.m., 5 days a week, sometimes 6. I stocked shelves, manned the register, cleaned the bathroom twice a day, and took out garbage in weather that made my fingers go numb even inside gloves. On the days when Bhavesh needed extra help, I stayed until 4 or 5. He paid me for the extra hours sometimes. When he didn't, I said nothing, because saying nothing felt safer than losing the job entirely. In the evenings, I drove for a food delivery app using a car I shared with one of my flatmates, a man from Andhra Pradesh named Srinivas who worked nights at a warehouse. We passed the keys to each other like a baton. He came home at 7 a.m. I took the car at 5 p.m. On good nights, I made $60 in tips and delivery fees. On bad nights, $22. I drove through streets I didn't know, in a city that didn't care about me, delivering food to people in buildings with doormen who looked through me like I was made of air. I ate in the car, usually something cold I had packed in the morning, rice and some dal Srinivas had made, or a roti with pickle. I ate at red lights, between deliveries, outside apartment buildings, parked under street lamps on empty streets at 11 p.m. while Chicago slept around me. I called Meena every night at 10:30. India time? That was 10 a.m. the next morning. She would pick up on the 3rd or 4th ring. We talked for 10, maybe 15 minutes. She told me what was happening at home, Priya's college, Arjun's new job lead, her sister's visit. I told her I was fine, work was good, the money was coming. She said, "Okay, and that's good, and take care of yourself." We never talked about whether I was happy. I don't think either of us could afford to ask. The first time I sent money home, it was $800. I sent it through a remittance service on Devon Avenue run by a Punjabi man with a thick mustache. When I saw Meena's WhatsApp message, "Received, thank you," I felt, for just a moment, like the equation Vikram had described was real. Work hard, send money, the family survives. I was the engine. That was my purpose. I told myself that was enough. I told myself that every morning when I stood outside Quick Stop at 4:58 a.m., watching my breath make small clouds in the cold Chicago air, waiting for Bhavesh to open the door, and every morning for a few seconds before I walked inside and the day swallowed me whole, I thought about Nagpur, about Sunday cricket, about dal that made a man cry, about Meena's voice saying, "Be careful." I didn't know then what she was warning me about. I found out much, much later. And by then, there was nothing left to save. By December, I had stopped counting days. In the beginning, I kept a small notebook, a red one I had bought at a Dollar Tree on Western Avenue for $1. 25. Every night before sleeping, I wrote the date and how much I had earned. It made me feel like I was in control of something, like the numbers on the page were proof that the suffering had a direction. But somewhere around the 8th week, I stopped writing, not because things got better, because the numbers started to feel like a joke I was telling myself. Here is what nobody tells you about America before you come. They tell you about the opportunity, they show you the skyline, they talk about the dollars. What they don't tell you is the arithmetic of survival. Let me give you mine, because I want you to understand, really understand, what those months looked like from inside. My income, on a good month, around $2, $400. Convenience store wages plus delivery earnings, if the weather cooperated and my body held up. My expenses, $600 for the room, $180 for my share of the car, insurance, and fuel. $90 for my phone plan. I needed the data for the delivery app. $200 for food if I cooked carefully and never ate out. $60 for the remittance service fees alone, not counting what I sent. Laundry, toiletries, winter boots when my old ones cracked from the cold. Another $80 at least. What was left after sending $800 home? Sometimes $300, sometimes $180. Once, in a month, when the car had a problem and I missed 4 days of delivery work, I had $43 left over. $43. I kept that in my wallet like a photograph of everything that had gone wrong. And still, every month, I sent the money because that was the agreement. Not an agreement I had signed, not one anyone had spoken aloud, but an agreement that existed in the space between every phone call, every WhatsApp message, every time Meena mentioned that Arjun needed money for a certification course, or that Priya's college fees were due, or that the kitchen tap was broken and the plumber wanted 8,000 rupees. I was the tap they turned on. The money flowed. That was my function. Srinivas was the first person in America who treated me like a human being. He was from a small town outside Hyderabad, 41 years old, divorced, had a daughter he hadn't seen in 2 years. He had been in Chicago for 3 years and knew the city the way a prisoner knows his cell. Every corner, every rule, every dangerous hour. He taught me which neighborhoods to avoid for deliveries after 9 p.m. He showed me where to buy the cheapest good rice, a shop on Milwaukee Avenue run by an old Polish woman who somehow stocked Sona Masuri. He told me which of Bhavesh's moods meant I should work quietly and which meant I could ask a question without getting a lecture in return. Srinivas didn't talk much, but what he said was always worth hearing. One night in December, it must have been past midnight, I had just come back from deliveries and he was about to leave for his warehouse shift. He looked at me while I was eating cold rice, standing at the kitchen counter, and he said very quietly, "You're losing weight, Rajan Bhai." I said I was fine. I said I was just adjusting. He looked at me for a moment without speaking. Then he said, "Don't let this place eat you. It will if you let it. It doesn't even know it's doing it. That's the worst part." Then he picked up his bag and walked out the door, and I stood there in that small kitchen under the yellow light, and for the first time since I had landed in Chicago, I felt something crack open inside my chest. Not dramatic, not loud, just a quiet splitting like old wood giving way in the cold. I finished my rice. I washed the bowl. I set my alarm for 4:15 a.m. I went to sleep. My body started speaking to me in January. It began with the knees, a grinding sound when I climbed stairs that I had never heard before. Then the lower back, a dull, constant pressure that was there when I woke up and still there when I lay down at night. By February, I had a pain in my right shoulder from lifting stock crates at Quick Stop, a repetitive ache that radiated down my arm when I reached above my head. I bought a tube of pain relief gel from Walgreens on Belmont Avenue and used it every night before sleeping. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself real men from Nagpur didn't complain about aching shoulders. I told myself my father had worked 31 years at a mill without a word of complaint. What I didn't tell myself was that my father had died at 63 of a heart attack that nobody saw coming. That he had worked himself so completely into the ground that his body finally just stopped one afternoon, alone, in the break room of the mill. I didn't let myself think about that. On the phone with Meena, I told her I was healthy, the work was manageable, America was cold but fine. She told me Arjun had finally gotten a job interview at a logistics company in Pune. She sounded happy about it. The conversation lasted 11 minutes. When I hung up, I sat on my mattress and looked at the ceiling of the living room. There was a water stain in one corner that looked, depending on the light, either like a map of India or like a man falling. And I felt a loneliness so complete, it was almost like a physical presence in the room with me. It was the kind of loneliness that has no solution, not the loneliness that goes away with a phone call or a meal with a friend. The kind that comes from being in the wrong place, the wrong life, the wrong version of the story you thought you were living. It was Meena's sister Kamla who first mentioned the land. This was in late January. Meena and I were on a video call, one of the longer ones, maybe 25 minutes. And Kamla appeared in the background, visiting from Warda. She leaned into the frame and said very casually, "The way you mentioned the weather. Rajan, Meena was telling me you're doing so well there. We were thinking, there's a plot of land near Warda Road. Good price right now. If you could send a little extra this month. I looked at Mina. Mina looked at the floor. I said I would think about it. After the call, I lay on my mattress and I thought, I am working 18 hours a day in the cold, eating in a car, sleeping on the floor, and somewhere back home. My wife's sister is casually asking me for land money over a video call. I sent the extra money. R is 80, 000. I told myself it was an investment. I told myself land was always good. I told myself family was family. Kamla sent me a thank you voice note that was 47 seconds long. The humiliation, when it came, never announced itself. It came in small moments. The way Bhavesh spoke to me in front of customers, a slight sharpness in his voice when I made a mistake at the register, never loud enough to be called cruelty, but always loud enough to remind me of my position. The way the younger delivery drivers, boys in their 20s, American-born, talking on their earphones while they drove, would look at me in the parking lot where we sometimes waited for orders, this old Indian man in his tired jacket, and look away again as if I wasn't worth the attention of a second glance. The way Americans looked past me in public, not with hatred, not with hostility, with something worse, complete indifference, like I was furniture, like I was part of the background noise of the city, necessary and invisible and entirely interchangeable. Back in Nagpur, I had been someone. Not rich, not famous, but known, respected. When I walked into a shop on Sitabuldi, men who knew my father nodded at me. When I spoke at a neighborhood meeting, people listened. I had weight. I had a history. I had a name that meant something in a street that had watched me grow up. In Chicago, I was a middle-aged man in a red quick-stop apron who cleaned the bathroom twice a day and ate cold rice in a car. I want you to understand. It is possible to lose yourself completely while believing you are building something. The night everything changed was a Thursday in late February. I had worked at the store from 5 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, and then taken the car for deliveries from 5 until almost midnight, 19 hours total, with a 3-hour break in between during which I had slept in the car, parked on a side street in Logan Square, with my jacket over my face like a shroud. I came back to the apartment at 12:40 a.m. Srinivas was already gone for his shift. The flat was quiet. I ate some leftover rice straight from the pot, didn't even bother to heat it, sat on my mattress, picked up my phone to call Mina. It was morning there, a good time to call. The phone rang. No answer. I called again. No answer. I sent a message. Calling you. You okay? I waited. Nothing. I put the phone down and told myself she was probably busy, probably at the market, probably in the bathroom. There were 100 reasons a person didn't pick up a phone. I lay back on the mattress, and that was when I saw it. A message in our family WhatsApp group, sent 2 hours earlier, while I was still driving through the dark streets of Chicago delivering food to strangers. A photograph. Arjun, Priya, Meena, all 3 of them. In a restaurant, a nice one, the kind with cloth napkins and candles. Arjun had his arm around Meena's shoulder. Priya was laughing at something off camera. Meena was smiling, a real smile, the kind I hadn't seen on a video call in months. Someone had written the caption, "Celebrating Arjun's new job." I stared at that photograph for a long time. My family, celebrating, happy, together, without me. And I realized, with a clarity that was both simple and devastating, that life back home had not paused while I was gone. It had continued. It had celebrated. It had eaten at nice restaurants and laughed at things off camera. It had moved on. And somewhere between the cold and the rice and the aching shoulder and the bathroom cleanings and the 4:15 a.m. alarms, I had not moved at all. That was the beginning of what I started to understand. But the real truth, the truth that would break something in me permanently, was still waiting, and it arrived 6 weeks later in the form of a phone call I was never supposed to receive. There are things you notice only in hindsight, the small shifts, the slight changes in temperature that don't register until you're already frozen. You think back later, weeks, months later, and you see the signs laid out like breadcrumbs on a path you already walked, and you wonder how you missed them. How a man who considers himself intelligent, observant, experienced, how that man can be so completely blind to what is happening right in front of him. But that is the particular cruelty of trust. It makes you stop looking. After the night I saw that restaurant photograph, Something changed in me. Not loudly. I didn't make any decisions. I didn't say anything to Mina. I just began, quietly, without fully knowing I was doing it, to pay attention differently. I started noticing what was not said instead of what was said. March came, and with it, a cold that felt personal. Chicago in March is a betrayal. You think winter is ending, there are 3 or 4 days where the air softens and you allow yourself something like hope, and then the temperature drops again and snow comes back like it was never going to leave. Old-timers in the neighborhood laughed about it. March will fool you every time, Bhavesh said one morning, watching snow fall on Devon Avenue through the store window. He said it like a warning meant for the weather. I heard it as something else. My body was running on a kind of grim momentum by then. The shoulder had not improved. I had started taking ibuprofen every morning with my tea. 2 tablets, then 3, because the pain was worse in the cold and I couldn't afford to slow down. I knew this was not a solution. I knew it the way you know that eating only rice is not nutrition, but do it anyway because the alternative costs more than you have. At Quick Stop, Bhavesh hired a young man named Deepak, 23, recently arrived from Gujarat, sharp eyes and a fast smile, and gave him slightly more responsibility than he gave me. Deepak called Bhavesh Kaka and laughed loudly at his jokes and stayed late without being asked. Within 3 weeks, Deepak was handling the weekend cash drawer, a task Bhavesh had never trusted me with. I noticed I said nothing. I was getting very good at saying nothing. The phone call I need to tell you about came on a Tuesday. It was the 2nd week of March. I remember because there was still ice on the sidewalk outside the apartment, and I had nearly fallen coming home from the car the night before, catching myself on a metal railing just in time, my heart slamming against my ribs from the shock of almost going down. I was in the store, in the back room, on my break. 15 minutes. I always spent it sitting on an overturned crate near the water heater, where it was warm, eating whatever I had brought from home. That day, it was flattened rice, poha, that I had made myself early that morning. I was eating it from a small container, looking at nothing, when my phone rang. Unknown number, Indian code, but not Nagpur. Mumbai, I thought, or somewhere in Maharashtra. I almost didn't pick up. Then something made me answer. Hello? A woman's voice. Careful, like someone choosing each word before releasing it. Is this Rajan Deshmukh? Yes, who is this? A pause. Then, my name is Sunita. I am calling because I think you should know something. About your family. My hand tightened on the phone. What about my family? Another pause. Longer this time. And in that pause, I heard everything. The careful breath, the slight tremor. The sound of someone about to say something they know cannot be unsaid. Your son Arjun, she said. He has been telling people that you are sending money for the land purchase, the land near Wardour Road. You remember? Yes. That land was purchased 6 weeks ago, she said. It is registered in Arjun's name, not yours, not your wife's, Arjun's name. I sat very still on the overturned crate. The water heater hummed beside me. Somewhere in the store, I could hear Deepak whistling. I see, I said, because it was the only thing I could find. I'm sorry, the woman said. She sounded like she meant it. I am Arjun's colleague, was his colleague. He mentioned it one evening, boasting, actually, about how the land was already in his name and you don't even know. I don't think he realized I would remember. Or care. But I have a father too, Mr. Deshmukh. I have a father who worked hard his whole life. I thought you should know. I thanked her. I don't remember what I said exactly. I know I kept my voice steady. I know I did not raise it. I know that when I hung up the phone, I sat on that crate for 4 more minutes. I know because I watched the time on my phone. Before I stood up, put the phone in my pocket, picked up my container of poha, walked back to the register, and smiled at the customer, waiting to buy a bottle of water and a pack of gum. Cold one today, huh? The customer said. Yes, I said. Very cold. I did not call Mina that night. For the first time in months, I let the 10:30 p.m. slot pass without calling. I lay on my mattress and I thought, not dramatically, not with tears, just with the slow, careful thinking of a man who is finally willing to see what he has been looking away from. The land. Rs 80 000 I had sent, registered in Arjun's name. I thought about the restaurant photograph, the celebration, the cloth napkins, and the candles. I thought about how Mina always knew about my earnings before I told her. She would sometimes reference an amount I hadn't yet mentioned, correcting herself quickly, saying she had guessed. I thought about how Arjun, in the rare moments he spoke to me on calls, asked questions that now seemed less like curiosity and more like accounting. How much are you making now, Papa? Is it more than before? When do you think you'll be able to send more? I thought about Kamla, leaning into the video call frame to mention the land so casually, Mina looking at the floor. I thought about the fact that in 7 months, not one of them, not Mina, not Arjun, not Priya, had once asked me how I felt. Not once had any of them said, "Papa, are you okay over there? Are you happy? Are you lonely? Does it hurt?" Not one time, because asking those questions would have required them to care about the answer. I want to be honest with you about what I felt that night, because I think honesty is the only thing I have left to give. I did not feel rage, not yet. What I felt was something quieter and more devastating, a deep, structural sadness, the kind that comes when you realize a truth that has been true for a long time, long before you were willing to see it. My family loved me. I believe this, even now. But they loved me the way you love a well. You love it when you are thirsty. You're grateful for it. You would be sorry if it ran dry, but you don't think about the well's feelings. You don't wonder if the well is cold, or tired, or lonely, or afraid. The well is just there. That is its purpose. That is its entire identity. I was their well, and I had crossed an ocean and destroyed my body and eaten cold rice in a car and swallowed humiliation after humiliation. Not for a dream, I realized. Not for myself. For them to have money they didn't earn and land in their name and restaurant celebrations, while I sat on a mattress on the floor in Chicago. I pressed my palms flat against my eyes in the dark, and I stayed very still. Outside the window, the city made its sounds. A siren somewhere, a car passing, the wind through the alley. Nobody knew where I was. Nobody was awake thinking about me. In Nagpur, it was morning and life was continuing, and I was just the source, the wire, the channel through which money flowed from here to there. The next morning, I got up at 4:15. I made tea. I put on my jacket. I walked to the bus stop, but something was different, not visible, not loud, just inside me. Something had shifted, like when a door that has been stuck for years is finally moved, not opened, just moved, so you feel the possibility that it could open, even if you don't yet push. I went to work. I stocked shelves. I smiled at customers. I cleaned the bathroom. But I had started thinking for the first time since arriving in America about a question that had never occurred to me before. Not, how do I send more money home? Not, how do I survive the next month? But this, what do I actually want? I called the woman, Sunita, back 3 days later. I asked her how she knew my number. She said Arjun had it saved in a shared work contact system, accessible to colleagues. I asked her to tell me everything she knew. She did. It took 22 minutes. I sat in Srinivas's car in the parking lot of a Jewel Osco supermarket on Sheridan Road, engine off, getting colder and colder, and I listened to a stranger dismantle the story I had told myself for 8 months. The land was in Arjun's name, confirmed. Arjun had been telling people, colleagues, friends, that his father in America was very successful, making very good money. He used my existence as social currency. My suffering was his prestige. Mina had known about the land registration. Sunita wasn't certain, but the timing of certain conversations she'd overheard made her believe so. And there was one more thing. One thing Sunita hesitated before saying, as if she wanted to give me the chance to stop her. I told her to say it. Arjun told someone, she said slowly, that once the land is sold, in a few years, when prices go up, the money will be his and Priya's. He said, she paused. He said his father can keep working in America. That's what he's there for. The parking lot was very quiet. Snow had started falling again, light and indifferent, the way Chicago snow always was, as if the city was barely trying. That's what he's there for. I was 45 years old. I had bad knees and a shoulder that woke me up at night and a mattress on a floor in a city that would never know my name. And my son, whom I had watched play cricket on Sunday afternoons, whose homework I had checked, whose college fees I had somehow managed to pay, my son had reduced me to a function. That's what he's there for. I drove home in the snow. I didn't cry. I wasn't ready to cry yet. But I was ready, finally, to stop pretending. And in stopping the pretending, in letting the truth sit in front of me like a stone I could no longer walk around, I found something I had not expected. I found anger. And anger, after so much silence, felt almost like life. Anger is a strange companion. It does not announce itself with fire and noise the way people imagine, not when it comes after a long silence. It arrives quietly, the way frost arrives. You don't see it forming, but one morning you wake up and everything is changed and you understand that the change happened in the dark, while you were sleeping, while you were looking elsewhere. I carried that anger carefully for 2 weeks. I didn't spill it. I didn't make phone calls I would regret. I didn't send messages in the night. I went to work. I delivered food. I ate in the car. I came home. But something inside me was reorganizing itself, rearranging furniture in a dark room, slowly, by feel. Srinivas noticed before I said a word. One evening when we were trading the car keys, he looked at me for a moment and said, "Something happened." Not a question. A statement. I told him. All of it. Standing in the hallway of the apartment, still in my jacket, the keys in my hand. I told him about Sunita's call, about the land, about what Arjun had said. I told him about the restaurant photograph and the celebrations and 8 months of cold rice and the shoulder that hadn't stopped hurting and the Rs8000 registered in my son's name. Srinivas listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What are you going to do?" And for the first time since arriving in America, I had an answer that was entirely my own. "I'm going to stop," I said. "Everything. I'm going to stop." The next Monday, I did not send money. The Monday after that, I did not send money. I had never, in 8 months, missed a transfer. It was as reliable as a heartbeat, as automatic. The money moved from my account in America to the account in Nagpur, and everyone on the other side continued their lives without thinking about what it cost to keep that heartbeat going. On the 3rd day after the first missed transfer, Meena called, not at 10:30 p.m., at 2 in the afternoon, my time, which meant something was urgent because she knew I was usually working. I let it ring. She called again. I let it ring again. She sent a message. "Rajan, why haven't you sent? Everything okay?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Are you sick? Are you hurt? Did something happen to you?" Everything okay? Meaning, is the money okay? Is the pipeline okay? Is the function still functioning? I put the phone face down on the passenger seat and drove to my next delivery. Arjun called that evening. This was unusual. In 8 months, Arjun had called me voluntarily, perhaps 4 times. He was always busy, always somewhere, always with a reason why he couldn't talk long. But that evening, my phone lit up with his name at 7:43 p.m. while I was parked outside an apartment building on North Daman Avenue, waiting for a pickup. I answered, "Papa." His voice was careful, measured, the voice of someone who has been coached on what to say, or who has rehearsed it himself. "Mama is worried. You haven't sent this month. Is everything all right?" I said, "Tell me about the land, Arjun." Silence, not long. 2, 3 seconds. But in those seconds, I heard everything. The recalculation, the search for the exit, the decision about which version of the story to use. "What land?" he said. Casual, almost bored. "The land near Warda Road. The Rs8000 I sent. The land registered in your name." Another silence, longer. "Papa, that was for the family. It's for all of us. I put it in my name for legal reasons. It's easier for Arjun." I said his name and nothing else. He stopped talking. "I know," I said. "I know all of it. I know what you told your colleagues. I know what you said about me." The line was very quiet. Outside the car, a couple walked past on the sidewalk, laughing about something, their breath making white clouds in the March air. "Papa, I can explain." "You don't need to explain," I said. "I'm not calling to fight. I'm calling because I want you to hear this clearly, so there is no confusion later." I took a breath. "I am not sending money anymore, not this month, not next month. I don't know about after that. But for now, it stops." "Papa, you can't." "I can," I said. "I can because it is my money. I can because I earned it on a floor in a store at 5 in the morning while you were sleeping. I can because I have that right, Arjun. Even fathers have that right." He said nothing. Take care of yourself, I said. I hung up. I want to tell you what happened in my body in the minutes after that call, because it matters. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, I want to be precise about this, from something else. From the physical shock of having spoken a true thing after so many months of swallowing true things. It is its own kind of violence, speaking the truth when you have been silent so long. Your body doesn't know how to hold it. I sat in the car for a while. The pickup notification came and went. I missed the order. I didn't care. I thought about my father and his 31 years at the mill. I thought about what he had built and what it had cost him and how he had died in a break room at 63 without enough time to spend what little he had saved. I thought about all the men I had known in my life who had worked themselves into the ground with the belief that sacrifice was the same thing as love, who had confused being needed with being valued, who had given everything to people who mistook generosity for inexhaustibility. I was not going to die in a break room. I was not going to be a well. Mina called again that night. This time I answered. The conversation was not dramatic. That is the thing about real pain. It doesn't perform itself. Mina spoke in a low, controlled voice. She said I was being selfish. She said the family depended on me. She said I was punishing everyone for something she didn't fully understand, some misunderstanding about the land, some confusion. I listened. I let her finish. Then I said, Mina, when was the last time you asked me if I was okay? Silence. Not whether the money was sent, not whether I was working enough, whether I, Rajan, was okay, happy, healthy, surviving. She didn't answer immediately. When she spoke, her voice was quieter. I assumed you were fine. You assumed? I said. You always said you were fine. Because nobody asked otherwise, I said. Because every call was about money or the house or the children. Because I was always the one asking about everyone else and no one ever turned it around. A long silence. And then, and this is the moment I will carry with me forever, not because it was the worst moment, but because it was the most honest one. Mina said, very quietly, I didn't know you were unhappy, Rajan. Not, I'm sorry, not, I should have asked. I didn't know. And the truth is, I believe her. That is the most painful part. She genuinely didn't know, because I had hidden it so completely, wrapped it so neatly inside money transfers and late-night calls and assurances that everything was fine. She had been allowed to not know. I had made it easy for her to not know. We had both failed each other, in our own ways, across an ocean. I told her I needed time. I told her I was not abandoning them. I told her I needed to figure out what I was doing with my own life before I could keep being useful to other people. She said she understood. I don't know if she did, but she said it. In April, things began, slowly, in small ways, to change. I spoke to an immigration attorney whose office was on Oakton Street in Skokie. A Malayali man, sharp and practical, who told me my options clearly without dressing them up. I had more of them than I had realized. There were pathways I hadn't known existed because I had been too busy surviving to look up. I found a different job, through Srinivas, who knew someone, at an Indian grocery warehouse in Niles. Better pay, indoor work, a manager who treated workers like adults. The shoulder still hurt, but I was lifting differently now, more carefully, with the knowledge that my body was not a machine to be used up. I started cooking properly, real meals, not just rice and dal eaten standing up. I found a small park on Pratt Avenue where I walked for 40 minutes on weekend mornings when the weather allowed. I found a temple on Leamington Avenue, a small, humble place, nothing like the temples at home, but it smelled right, incense and sandalwood and something underneath that I can only call memory. I went there on a Sunday morning and sat in the back and didn't pray exactly, but I was quiet in a way I hadn't been quiet since arriving in this country. Not the emptiness of exhaustion. The quietness of a man who has stopped running and is now, carefully, choosing his direction. Arjun called again, 6 weeks after our conversation. His voice was different. The careful rehearsal was gone. He sounded younger. He sounded, actually, a little afraid. He said, Papa, I want to apologize. I said, Okay. What I said, what I told people, it was wrong. I was showing off. I was embarrassed that you were there working, and I was here not doing enough, and instead of feeling the right thing about that, I made it into something else. I made it into, I don't know what I was thinking. I listened. I'm sorry, he said, and this time, it was not the calculated sorry of a man trying to restore a cash flow. It was smaller than that, more human. The land, I said. Transfer it to your mother's name. A pause. Okay. And Arjun, get a second job if you need money, work more. That is not an insult. That is just what you do. Yes, Papa. We talked for a while after that. Not about money, about Nagpur, about cricket, about nothing important and everything important. When we hung up, I sat in the silence of the apartment. Srinivas was at work. The flat was empty, and I felt something I had forgotten the texture of. Not happiness, not yet, something just before happiness. The clearing of the throat before the voice comes back. I am still in Chicago. I am not rich. I was never going to be rich. I understand that now, and it no longer feels like failure. I work at the warehouse. I walk in the park on Pratt Avenue. I go to the temple on Sundays. I call Meena twice a week, and we talk differently now. Slower, more careful, more honest. It is the conversation we should have been having from the beginning. Priya called me last month, just to talk. No money, no request, no agenda. She called to tell me she had started learning to cook, and she made dal for the first time, and it came out wrong, and she called to ask me how Meena made it, because she said mine was always the best. I sat on a bench in the park and told her everything I knew about making dal. Every step, every small thing my mother had told me, that I had watched Meena do, that I had absorbed over 45 years of dinners eaten with people I loved. I talked for 20 minutes about dal. It was the best conversation I had in America. I think about my father sometimes, about what he would say if he could see me now, a middle-aged man in Chicago, working a warehouse job, learning late in life to ask for things he needs, learning late in life that sacrifice without boundaries is not virtue, it is just destruction with better intentions. I think he would understand. I think the 31 years at the mill taught him things he never had the time to say out loud. I think he would sit across from me at a table somewhere and drink tea and not say much, the way he rarely said much. But he would look at me with those quiet eyes, and I would know, the way sons always know without words, that he was not disappointed, that he saw a man who had finally stopped falling. That was enough. That is enough. If you are working yourself to nothing for people who have stopped seeing you, I am not telling you what to do. I am only telling you what happened to me. The day I stopped performing sacrifice was the day I started surviving in a way that actually meant something, not for them, for the first time in my life, for me.